In 1989, they sealed the gates of Europe's richest salt mine. 3,000 years of continuous operation, gone in a single day. Hallstatt's mountain had been hollowed from the inside. Now 2,000 people had nothing. For 3 millennia, Hallstatt's mountain bled salt. Not metaphorically, the Halline Massif in Upper Austria literally sweated brine from its core, and from roughly 1000 BCE onward, someone noticed. They dug deeper. By the Middle Ages, Hallstatt's salt mines were generating more wealth per capita than gold deposits elsewhere in Europe. The town sat at 508 meters above sea level, population steady around 2,000 for centuries. Every house, every child's future, every church bell and roof tile existed because of what lay beneath the stone. The rhythms were ancient and precise. Miners descended before dawn into shafts that plunged 400 meters into darkness. The work was seasonal, summer for hard rock extraction using iron picks, winter for brine extraction, when water pumped through the mountain dissolved salt and returned it as concentrate. A single miner, in 1540, could produce roughly 300 kilograms of salt per day. By 1900, mechanization had transformed that into industrial-scale operations, 450 tons extracted weekly. The Habsburg monarchy recognized this. They claimed the mines as crown property. They built monopolies around it. They taxed it ruthlessly. Hallstatt endured because the world wanted salt for food preservation, for leather tanning, for chemical synthesis, for the basic machinery of survival and commerce. Daily life in Hallstatt reflected this singular dependency. The mining company, eventually the Austrian state itself, didn't just employ miners. It owned the housing, the stores, the salt workers' school. 3 generations of the same family might work the same tunnel, using inherited techniques. The town had a 1,000-year archaeological layer. Its cemetery held miners from the Celtic period. In 1989, when the gates finally sealed, Hallstatt didn't just lose a job. It lost its reason for existing. But before the closure came a choice, one that powerful men made decades earlier, and one that the town's leaders desperately tried to resist. In 1966, the Austrian government made a decision that would echo through Hallstatt for the next 23 years. They chose to build a new chemical salt plant in Ebensee, 40 kilometers away. It was cheaper. It was modern. It required no mountain. The Hallstatt mines, by contrast, were ancient infrastructure, wooden pit shafts, hand-dug tunnels, methods that hadn't fundamentally changed since the Bronze Age. Extracting salt from rock cost 3 times what it cost to synthesize it in a factory. By the 1970s, the writing was visible to anyone who looked. Production quotas at Hallstatt dropped from 40,000 tons annually to 32,000. Younger workers left for jobs in Linz and Vienna. The mining company, now state-owned, kept the operation running partly out of inertia, partly out of obligation to the 2,000 people whose livelihoods depended on it. The mine employed 1 in 3 working adults in the town. The town's burgomaster, the mayor, knew what was coming. In 1985, he began quietly recruiting tourism operators. A salt mine museum, cable cars, package tours from Salzburg. If the mountain couldn't feed them through mining, perhaps it could feed them through visitors. But tourism takes years to build, and the Austrian government had already made its calculation. Hallstatt was expendable. In 1988, the final warning arrived. The mining company announced it would close the operation on January 1st, 1990. Not gradually, not with transition support. Complete cessation. The town had 1 year to transform itself, or watch itself hollow out from within. The burgomaster scrambled. Tourism infrastructure was hastily completed. But something else was already underway, something the town couldn't control, something that would change not what Hallstatt was, but who Hallstatt was for. On March 15, 1989, the last shift descended into the Hallstatt mine. 2,000 years before, Roman soldiers had hammered salt from this mountain. 1,000 years before that, Bronze Age workers had done the same. Now, on a Wednesday morning, 212 miners clocked in for the final time. The decision had been made in Vienna 2 years earlier. Salt synthesis was cheaper. Coastal evaporation in Spain and Portugal undercut Hallstatt's price by 40%. The mine that had sustained continuous employment since 1000 BCE could not compete with chemistry. Within weeks, the processing halls fell silent. The cable cars that had carried ore down the mountainside stopped moving. By summer 1989, the workforce had scattered, some to other industries, some to other countries. The town's population, which had held steady at 2,000 for 3 centuries, began its slow contraction. Between 1989 and 2000, Hallstatt lost 400 residents. The salt tax, which had funded the town's schools and churches since medieval times, vanished. The miners' pension fund, promised for life, was absorbed into the Austrian state system. What remained was a hollowed mountain, 7,000 meters of tunnels breathing cold air into darkness, and a town suddenly weightless, no industry, no purpose, no reason to stay. In the decade that followed, something unexpected happened to Hallstatt's emptiness. The mine closed on May 15, 1989. Within months, Hallstatt's population began to move. The town that had sustained 2,000 people for 3 millennia now faced a question no one could answer. What happens when the reason a place exists simply stops existing? The economic collapse was swift. By 1995, fewer than 900 residents remained. Unemployment in the Salzkammergut region reached 12%, nearly triple the Austrian national average. Entire families, whose ancestors had worked the same tunnels for centuries, relocated to Vienna, Linz, and Germany in search of industrial work. The mining company, Hallstatt, which had operated continuously since 1279, offered severance packages that ranged from 50,000 to 200,000 shillings, roughly $4,000 to $16,000 per worker. Not enough to restart a life elsewhere. What no one anticipated was the physical scar itself. The mountain, hollowed by 3,000 years of extraction, began to settle. Sinkholes appeared in village streets in 1991, 1994, and 1997. Houses cracked. One cottage on Markt Square sank 18 inches in a single winter. The Austrian Geological Survey issued warnings. Mining engineers calculated that the workings beneath Hallstatt contained roughly 15 million cubic meters of empty space, a void the size of 5,000 Olympic swimming pools suspended inside the bedrock. Psychologists who studied the town documented something unexpected: collective grief. Residents spoke of the mine as a living thing that had died. Klaus Brenner, a former overseer who worked 41 years underground, said in a 1992 interview, "The mountain took our future." The phrase appeared in the Hallstatt Gazette 3 times that year. But by 1995, something else was happening at the town's edges, something that would transform the abandoned mine from a symbol of loss into something far more complicated. Today, Hallstatt's mine still exists, but not as a place of work. In 1995, the Austrian government designated the abandoned shafts a cultural monument. Tourism replaced extraction. Now 7,000 000 visitors descend annually into the same tunnels that once employed 500 miners, walking on wooden rails dating to 1875, seeing salt walls untouched since 1989. Archaeologists have found what the miners left behind. In 2001, excavations near the mine entrance uncovered Iron Age textiles, preserved by salt for 500 years. Names inscribed on tunnel walls. A leather shoe from 1500 BCE. Each artifact rewrites what we know, that Hallstatt was not simply an economic engine, but a continuous human presence so deep it pressed itself into stone. The town itself became a paradox. By 2010, population had fallen to 774, many families gone within a generation. Yet the mine's fame spread. Instagram users discovered the pastel-colored townscape. By 2018, Hallstatt received 1.2 million annual visitors, more than any Austrian site except Vienna. Tour buses now outnumber residents. What was lost remains quantifiable: 3,000 years of unbroken employment. Entire skill lineages. A geological understanding etched into family memory. What mining engineers discovered about salt extraction, techniques later exported worldwide, was never fully documented. Much was simply forgotten. Yet something unexpected persists. In 2019, researchers analyzing salt deposits in the mine discovered evidence of Bronze Age mining activity predating even 1000 BCE. The archive was deeper than anyone knew, and hidden within those same deposits, sealed in crystalline chambers that have never been opened, lie artifacts that archaeologists have identified but not yet extracted, evidence of how the earliest miners lived, worked, and what they valued most. A civilization built on salt dissolved the moment chemistry made it worthless. The mine still waits in the dark, a monument to the industries that vanish overnight. Another file is already open.